Today's guest is someone who has helped shape the modern comic book landscape, Chris Ryall. He is a writer, editor, publisher, and industry leader with decades of experience across every corner of the comic book industry. He's best known for his 15-year influential run at IDW Publishing, where he served as editor-in-chief, CCO, and eventually president. During his tenure at IDW, he produced some of the most iconic titles, managing major franchises like Transformers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Lock and Key, and many, many more. Chris has seen the industry from every angle, and he's been a champion for creators, original ideas, and new publishing models. And so today we're going to jump into his journey and the evolving state of the comic book industry. So with that, please welcome Chris Ryall to the show.
Yeah.
How are you doing, man?
Thank you, man. I'm doing well. Thank you. That was a great intro.
Yeah, I needed to ensure that we had all of your accolades well documented. So let's just jump a little bit back into your career, because you've had such a historic career and made such an impact on the industry. So when you look back on kind of like your early days, what was what originally pulled you into the comic book industry and saying like, I want to have a career?
I mean, honestly, it was love of comics, like childhood love of comics that I started reading comics like probably before I could read, prose books and stuff. So they've just always been a part of my life. And I just, I thought I would, like a lot of people, try to pitch projects here and there and see if I could make things happen from the outside. And then, so I wasn't at all expecting to ever work sort of within a publishing company. But in 2004, I had the chance to do just that. When IDW had an opening for editor-in-chief, and I talked to them and it worked out. And very quickly after that, I was packing up my life in LA and moving to San Diego for the role.
Wow. That's, but so how did you, can you share? And if you can't, that's fine. So how did you, what was the process to get that role?
Yeah. So I was working at an ad agency at the time, writing, technical copy, stuff like that. And, not my preferred style of writing. So I was doing comic reviews and things on the side. And through that, I got to know writer Steve Niles, who had done at the time, big book for IDW, 30 Days a Night. It was the book that really put them on the map. So I got to know Niles, and he called me up and said, IDW is looking for an editor-in-chief. Is that a thing you would ever consider? And at that point, I was also working for Kevin Smith on the side, running a website for him. And almost to the same week that I got the job offer from IDW, Kevin asked me to run a comic book shop for him in Westwood in Los Angeles. And so it was literally the choice of like, do I want to go publishing side or the retail side? Because they were both sort of offered at the same time. And the publishing side and the ability to, guide the publishing, manage the creative, write some books, all of those things that was really where my interest lied. So that was the one I picked.
So you threw out the name Kevin Smith. I didn't know that you knew Kevin Smith. That's amazing. Is he, so seeing him in interviews and some of his like speaking events, he seems like such a genuine like sweetheart. Is that like how is that accurate to like kind of how he is like off camera?
It is, but the funny thing is the way we met, and I mean, so this is kind of before like modern internet culture exploded the way it is now. Kevin actually reached out after I wrote a review of one of his DC book, Green Arrow. There were things in the first issue I had some problems with, like structurally, and I mentioned that in a review. And Kevin saw that and wrote to me and said, you're wrong, man. And we started this sort of just back and forth, this kind of friendly back and forth, defending each other's points and everything. And I thought, this is so weird. Like, why does he care what some faceless reviewer wrote about his comic? But he really cared. He really was the way he portrayed things in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. And so through that, it started with him pointing out where I was wrong. And then it kind of got jokey and friendly. And he eventually said, hey, man, I have this website that was in one of my movies. I want to turn it from like this parody site that it is into a legitimate pop culture portal. And I'd like you to run it if you would have any interest in that. And so, yeah, again, it was one of those things I don't think would ever happen now. But at the time,
Once upon a time in Hollywood, man. That's crazy.
It was very odd and unexpected offer, and it was right after he moved to LA, and so we got together and just talked about things, and yeah, I came away from that with a side job running his website for a couple of years, which is really the thing that led me to get to know people like Steve Niles and other comic creators. And so it was the side job more than anything else that led me down this path of actually getting into the publishing world.
That's so insane. Do you still have like contact with him at all, or did you maintain that relationship over the years? Or
Here and there, like
yeah,
he's running his podcast empire and directed TV and film and everything else he's doing. So I think the last time I saw him was we ran into each other at Comic-Con and said hello in the elevator. And
that's
I
so
saw him
awesome.
during one of his live podcasts that he did in San Diego. But yeah, otherwise, he's off doing his thing, and I'm still trying to muddle through and make as many books and comics as I can too.
That's incredible. That's such a cool story. That was so unexpected. So, going back to your career, sorry if you can hear my cat in the background. Given given your that's a pretty unique position, IDW major publisher. How how did that change your way and understanding of the comic book industry and give you like a new perspective?
Yeah, it's funny because I was the editor in chief of the website, and so there were a lot of things that I did in that role. So we were updating every single day without fail, through holidays and everything else. Just made sure that we were constantly always hitting deadlines because he wanted new content every day. And so I think that more than anything I did in my day job as like a copywriter was the thing that sort of helped me best fit in this job because comics, just like updating the website, was constant deadlines, and so just being able to manage deadlines, being able to pivot when I don't know a creator needs a break or doesn't turn work in on time, just having to figure out like how do you above all else keep everything on track and on time. And so that the couple of years of running the site before I got into the comic world was the thing that really sort of gave me my best like proper footing to be able to keep up with the onslaught of deadlines that the comic world always is.
What so you also, and correct me if I'm wrong, so you were also an executive producer on the Lock and Key for Netflix.
Yeah.
Were you still at IDW at that time? Like you were doing both in parallel?
Yeah, and I mean the executive producer role wasn't like a thing where I mean I did some set visits, but it wasn't like you were on set every day and sort of managing the day to day of shoot. It was my role as an EP was more of the I don't know, it's sort of the liaison between the print, the comics, and the TV, just to go through scripts. I mean, I went through casting, but I certainly don't have say over those things the way that the EPs working on the show in a more direct fashion, or like the creators had. Um, so I was mostly reading through scripts and offering notes and suggestions on things that I felt kind of got too far afield, went astray or just weren't at all true to the spirit of the comics. And so I was not on set every day, so I was able to do the day job and then just read scripts as part of that role.
Was there, I mean, that's a pretty cool like experience being able to visit these sets of something
Yeah.
like that major. Was there any crazy memories or anything that you garnered or learned from that experience?
Well, I mean, the funny thing is that I was on the set of three different Lock and Key pilots because it was originally shot for a Fox. The Fox made a pilot, and then that didn't get on air. And then Hulu made a pilot, and that didn't get on air. And then Netflix finally, was the one that was able to bring the show to air for 3 seasons. So I think the craziest part of it was just like, here we go again. And here's a different version of Key House. Here's a different
Interesting.
version of the Locke family. Although Bodhi was the one consistent, at least between the Hulu pilot and then the Netflix show. It was the same actor that played him in both of those. But it was just cool to see the world brought to life three different ways, and sort of the things that they shared and then things that they all did very differently. I do think the Netflix version was the sort of most accessible, crowd pleasing version of what they wanted to do with it. But I really like the Hulu pilot as well. I thought that one came together really nicely. That was done by the Machetes, who did Stephen King It movies, and then they went on to the Flash movie and are now running the It TV series. The Hulu pilot they made was really smart and cool and dark and creepy, and I really liked that version of it as well as the Netflix that finally got on air.
That's so, what a crazy experience, man. That's so
Yeah.
cool that you got to be a part of that. And got to like even like sit in on like the casting and see that kind of come to life. That's such a, have you had since then, have you had other experiences like that, or was that your,
No, I mean there have been other IDW productions that have happened. Like I was on set for 30 Days a Night back in
that was an
as
awesome
like
movie, but yeah.
yeah, I thought that came out great. And it was filmed in New Zealand. I'd never been to New Zealand before, and we got to visit Weta, who did all the vampire makeup and teeth and everything like that. So that was a very cool experience. But I think just seeing Lock and Key like alongside the creators like Joe Hill and Gabriel Rodriguez, and watching kind of the joy in their eyes and the wonder when they're seeing the stuff that they just put on, on the printed page, seeing it brought to life, and like here's the actual structures being built and everything like that, and just watching the stuff that they made as a comic come to life as a TV series was very cool, just to be able to experience that with them.
Yeah, that's honestly such cool experience, and that you'll be able to continue to carry forward throughout your career. So talking now a little bit more on the creative side specifically. Um, what you've had a ton of projects that have recently um, uh, coming out and recently released. Can you share some of those projects? I mean, you got to do a graphic novel for the Francis Ford Coppola. That's pretty insane. So I like tell me about that as well, and then some of the other projects that you have coming out.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of weird things that I definitely never take for granted, and that was another one where he just emailed me out of the blue. We had
Wow.
a mutual friend in Robert Rodriguez, filmmaker, who and I, Francis and Robert were talking, and he said, I want to make a graphic novel, and I don't know what to do or who to go to, and so I guess Robert recommended me, and so he
So
just
cool.
sent, like I say, sent an email saying, hey, I'd like to make a graphic novel on this film that I'm making. What do you think? And I said, absolutely, let's do that. And so, yeah, that was another like, you work at these things and you pitch things and you try all these different things that a lot of them never come to pass, and then every now and again, like these weird things just show up in your inbox, and it's so just
So like,
it was not expected.
no, that's an amazing, like that's so cool. Like, so walk me through that though a little bit. So how much creative freedom do you have on a venture like that? Like, I'm assuming, you're running a lot of it by him or his team. Like, can you share a little bit of
Well,
details on that? Because that's really cool.
yeah. So I emailed him back and I said, yeah, of course I'm the right guy to do this. I'm the only one who can do this with you, Francis Ford Coppola. And so we set a Zoom to discuss just kind of initial thoughts about it and everything like that. And so I sit down in front of the camera, and then it's it the it's like a wood, like a log cabin or something in the middle of the woods, and I'm like, and just the camera comes on, and then suddenly he comes in frame, and I was like, holy shit, like what are you? I thought it would be your team, and he goes, I'm my team, Chris. Me and you are making this book, no one else. Um,
That's
and
so
so,
cool.
yeah, I thought, like, because I was used to a lot of licensed projects where there's just all kinds of levels of approvals and all kinds of different
Right.
groups involved. And in this case, there was one guy, and it was so weird and cool and also freeing because he said, I don't care about this being shot for shot version of the film. Like I'm making the film, make this its own thing. He kept calling it a sibling to the film, not an adaptation, because he let me
Cool.
add scenes. We actually have a few additional scenes that were not in the movie. We sort of rejiggered some things. We re-dialogue some bits, and just made it work, in this format using sort of an older version of the story. He'd been working on the story for almost 4 decades, and so there were a
Cool.
lot of different parts of the material to pull from. And he was completely encouraging and open to any changes that needed to be made, which again is not the way a lot of licensed stuff or graphic novels based on big films ever are. Like there's usually very strict parameters on what you can and can't do, and so it was great. Like it was very freeing and cool.
And where is that? If someone wanted to pick that up, where would they go to get that?
So it came out in October, and it's available everywhere. Like Abrams Comic Arts, they have a Abrams is the publisher, and they have a Comic Arts division that does all the graphic novels, the adult graphic novel line anyway. They put out the book in October, and so it's available at bookstores and every online seller and all of that through the Abrams website. And so anywhere and everywhere you buy graphic novels, you should be able to find it.
Awesome. And you just also had another release December 3rd, a horror anthology. That came out through Image. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's funny. The year ended with like three very different releases of mine that came out October, November, December. So October was the Megalopolis graphic novel. November, I was part of this launch of a new line of books through Bloomsbury, which is they launched a line of books called the Marvel Age of Comics, which are the nonfiction books where writers and journalists and whatnot write about their favorite comic storyline, favorite character, favorite period in Marvel's history. So I did one of those books to help launch the line, and then I do this horror Christmas horror anthology called Dread the Halls, which we launched in December of 2024, and it went over well. We did a spin-off book in July that was all Comic-Con horror stories called Dread the Hall H. And so then we did a second Dread the Halls Christmas horror anthology that just came out in early December. So yeah, three very different kinds of writing.
That's I've never the anthology would be a fun project to do. I've never I got to add that to my bucket list. But you have an imprint with Image as well, right? Like, is that
so correct? When I left IDW, Image reached out and said, we like what you do. We know the kind of books you make, and if you'd like to do them here, we'd give you your own space to do that. So
cool.
Me and Ashley Wood, who is this Australian artist and painter, he and I originally worked together on a book called Zombies versus Robots, and done other things together. He and I launched the imprint at Image. First book we launched was Joe Hill's Reign, an adaptation of one of Joe Hill's short stories, and then onward from there. So we've been doing that for the last few years.
That's so cool, man. That's and so is he your so he's your partner in crime on that? Okay, cool.
Yeah, cool. So he and I have done some things together. He's done some books on his own, and then I've brought in other people as well to do different series over the last 4 or 5 years now.
So could somebody let's say I have the greatest idea of all time and I came to you, how does that work? You would have to want to green light that, and then you would have to approve that through Image would have to approve that, or how does that process work?
Yeah, I mean, Eric Stevenson at Image gave me a lot of freedom and leeway there, to just get books, bring in books and put them on the schedule. But I would say I've certainly slowed that down a bit over the last year or so, just because the market has, become a bit harder for independent titles. And so I've been doing less of those. And the imprint is thing we've been bootstrapping the whole time anyway. We haven't taken any kind of outside money. And so we definitely have, like I say, slowed what we've been able to do. And so right now that Dread the Halls was, well, for the year, that was the last book I'm putting out. And then, I got a few things on tap for next year, but it's not quite as robust a schedule as it was, 4 or 5 years ago when we launched, because I've also been doing more of these archival nonfiction books as well for other publishers.
Interesting. So going back to your time at IDW, and I remember we've had some conversations back and forth. But so, what was some of the biggest challenges and opportunities while you were basically running IDW? And I know that you were influential on bringing some major opportunities there. But can you share some of those challenges and opportunities?
Yeah, I mean the challenge was at the start trying to bring in big licenses, because it was a horror publisher. It was largely built on the backs of 30 Days of Night and some of Ashwood's art books, and then they started doing horror or licensed books like CSI and Angel. That sort of spun out of the TV series, and that was about it. And so when the Transformers license went up for bid in 2005. We put together a bid and everything and went out to Rhode Island and pitched it to Hasbro. And they were kind of like, why are you even in the room? Why are we talking to you? Who are you? We don't know what IDW even is. When there's all these, I saw somebody from Marvel there, and sort of from Dark Horse there, and so it was all these bigger companies and more established places looking to pitch on it. And so it was hard. It was hard to convince them that we were the right place to do it. But then once that happened, like once Transformers became a thing, it made all the other licenses that much of an easier conversation, because then you've kind of proven yourself. So at the start, the biggest challenge was just proving why we deserve to be part of the conversation alongside these much more established places.
So I have to ask then, and if you can't share, that's completely fine. So what was your secret sauce? Like, what was the secret sauce to get it?
It's funny. It was something that years later I started hearing that other people are using as a knock on IDW. And what I did was, like, I went in there and pitched them that we don't own our own Spider-Man. We don't have a Batman. We don't have those kind of sort of legacy titles that have built these companies. So we're going to treat the Transformers with the utmost importance and care and give it just the A-list treatment. Whereas some of these other companies that do have their own massive titles and superhero franchises and whatnot, you're never going to be their top priority. You're always going to
Right.
be the thing that gets serviced after X-Men and Spider-Man and so on. And so I think it helped make the case that you're going to be our number one. You're going to be our top priority. Um, and then, like I say, years later, I heard people saying that, well, IDW's got so many different brands. Like, if you give us your whatever it was, Garbage Pail Kids or something, whatever, we'll make that our top priority. IDW is too big and bloated, and they're now, a Marvel or DC. And so we want to prioritize your license. And so I thought it was kind of funny that things had gone full circle in that way.
That is hilarious. So that's interesting perspective. So yeah, the whole we are going to treat this with white gloves. And was there anything like you don't have to share the specifics, but was there also any like creative flair or lens that was unique to your guys' pitch too on that? Or
I mean, I don't know what the other creative proposals were, but we went in there with just a complete restart. Because the weird thing about
right,
Transformers at the time was they were being published by Dreamwave for a while. And then Dreamwave just had all kinds of money problems. Like, they spent sort of frivolously, and they were artists who started their own publishing company. And so they didn't necessarily pay attention to the business side of things with the same degree of urgency that they did the creative. And so everything just fell apart. All the Transformers series just stopped in midstream. Some creators weren't paid. The storylines were not resolved. And so it let a lot of fans down. And so what a lot of fans wanted from a new publisher was continue those stories, bring those stories to their proper conclusion. And we were like, we can't do that. Like, either we're retreading, or we're guessing at what another publisher wanted to do, or we're just not sort of putting our own stake in the ground and saying, this is what our version of Transformers is. We're saying, here's a inferior version of what had already been done before. So we're like, let's not do any of that. We want to start fresh. We had nothing to do with this previous company falling apart, and we can't salvage what they were doing at this point. So all we can do is start things over in a smart way. And here's the different creative teams that we would, put forth to try to do just that. And so that also seemed to work, because again, I don't think there was any way to pick up where the previous publisher left off, and make that work in any kind of seamless way. Even though there were a certain segment of fans that really wanted that. Just like when Sonic the Hedgehog moved over, they did 300 issues with Archie, and there were certain fans that were 300 issues of sort of investment in that continuity and wanted it to continue. But at a certain point, you just can't. You got to, like we did with Star Trek, with Ninja Turtles, you just have to start things over and start fresh.
Thank you for actually biting and providing that insight. That's great, man. That's I think listeners are really going to appreciate that. That's really cool. So I guess, again, given your unique position at IDW, is there one kind of misconception that people have about how the comic book publisher actually like operates behind the scenes? Because I see it every day on Twitter, or I guess it's X now, and it's just like they don't understand. They think money grows on trees. So yeah, anything that you can shed there?
Yeah, I mean that's part of it, and I did too. Like when I was a kid, anybody whose name was in a comic I was reading, I was like, oh man, they're famous. They're rich and famous. And like no, like people are just working and trying to get by, and doing month to month comics and hoping for the best and all of that. Weird thing is that there's so much talk about the behind the scenes now and the industry side of things and the business that goes on. And I mean, the numbers are usually misreported because most publishers don't share those numbers. And so the sites that report sales figures are usually off, sometimes by a little, sometimes by an awful lot. And like, we can never correct it, or you just kind of let it be misreported because there's usually no good in releasing hard numbers because people will misinterpret them, or they'll think that because a book sold, I don't know, 50,000 copies, that means it's massively successful. And so everybody should get raises and the title should then have 5 spin-offs. I'm like, but it's a very expensive license. Like there's high royalties paid to the licensor. Like the creative team, if you brought in top talents, is very expensive. And so sometimes a book that sells 10,000 could be more profitable than the book that sells 50,000. It just kind of depends on the structure and the team and the deal behind it. But I also find that a lot of that, like when people are asking those questions or when sites are reporting on those things, it just pulls people away from the comics and the stories themselves. And that's really where you want the focus to be. You don't want to be like having to talk about, this creator that said something stupid on social media and what are you going to do about that. Like it just, all of those things are such a distraction from what you want, which is for people to get invested in the stories and the characters. But I get it because now everybody sort of has access to everybody and everything, and so they are interested in those things. But to me it's always the least interesting because that's the tedious stuff that I didn't want to deal with. I wanted to just make comics.
Did you during your time? Did you have to? And then maybe at that time, I don't know how much social media the artists were prevalent on social media at that time. But did you ever have to put out fires from talent, like saying something silly or anything crazy like that? On yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Cool.
mean, and if it was their own book or something like that, then it's one thing. It's like, well, people are free to certainly voice whatever opinions they want. It was when it was like the creators that were working on a big license title where someone was the licensor, like you could plead your case to a licensor, but the management of a major licensor or toy company or film studio couldn't care less about like you trying to plead the case. They're like, you're
Yeah.
making negative, putting negative attention on us, make it go away. And that's the decree from on high. And so you have no choice but to kind of resolve that in whatever way, where it wouldn't even necessarily always be a thing that we wanted to do. But when it's not our property, like that's kind of the flip side of the license stuff is you're renting these things. And so you are the caretaker, but ultimately if the brand owner says, hey, we don't like whatever, you have to respond to that in whatever ways. Hopefully you can keep jobs and everything like that. But yeah, every now and then there was damage control.
The fun part of the job. So yeah, talking a little bit about like the state of the comic book industry and kind of the future. I mean, how do you think, in your view, um, the industry has changed since your time at IDW? Let's say over the last like 10 years, how have you seen it change both kind of creatively and like commercially?
I mean, in a few ways. So one is there are just fewer readers. Like I don't know where we lost people along the way, but whether it was in the '90s with the sort of glut of I don't know gimmicky things that jacked up the prices on back issues, not for story reasons or creative reasons. It was just because companies were trying to sell the most copies and the most variant covers and all these things that kind of give false inflation to numbers, but don't necessarily mean that a book is a strong seller. There's stuff like that. I mean, the advent of digital comics and being able to access through I don't know Comixology and all the other digital platforms, I think has been a big help in growing the audience and expanding things in different ways and sort of bringing back some of the lapsed readers who maybe don't want to or don't have access to a comic book store in the same way they used to. They can now read on their tablets and stuff like that. But it's also to a certain segment, devalued the material, because the digital stuff never quite resonates in the same way as the tactile
Totally.
holding of a book or buying the artifact or, the limited edition, the hardcover, whatever it may be. And so it's been both good and bad in that way. It's also certainly enabled bootlegging and piracy in a much much easier, broader fashion than we ever expected at the start when we were first dabbling in digital comics. And then oh, sorry, you were gonna add to that?
Yeah. I was just gonna say, the like for the initiatives that I've been involved in, I avoid. Everyone's always like, "Oh, can I get? Do you have PDF options?" No,
Yeah.
I'm not doing PDF options because I know immediately it is going to be on one of those sites, and you know, you're it's already very tough initiative to get a project off the ground and into actual readers' hands. So I don't want to, you know, undo that effort by piracy, given how rampant it is. So I guess like kind of speaking to that a little bit, we're like, how do you see the comic book industry evolving? Because I think we have this legacy model that, in my view, only kind of it worked for the 90s when you're selling 500 a million plus books. So how do you kind of see the industry evolving over the next few years? And then we'll just leave it at that, and then I'll do a follow-up question to that after you give you an answer.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely gotten harder to make the for the reader and for the publisher. It's gotten harder. Like it's a hard value proposition when you look at a comic book that is $4.99 and is 20 pages of story, or you can subscribe to whatever streaming service for 10-12 bucks a month, and you've got access to their entire library, or you've got YouTube, or you've got webtoons, or you've got all these other ways of sort of putting more content in front of you than you'd ever have time over the course of a natural lifespan to ever even get through a fraction of it. So it's like, how do you convince new readers, or people that are worried about the economy and all of that? How do you get them to be okay with spending $4 or $5 on a single issue? And if that keeps dropping, if people stop going to comic book stores to a greater degree, or they don't want to spend that kind of money for that few of pages, how do you engage them? Like, what's the best way to keep people reading and just give them the kind of books, the kind of stories, the kind of, I don't know, page count versus cost, that's going to keep them involved? Because certainly the way we used to do things isn't necessarily reaching the same numbers. And so, yeah, I think that's the constant conversation, is like, are 32-page comics a thing of the past, or should they be? Or should we, in a streaming world where you can watch an entire season over a weekend, should we be giving people more complete stories, or serializing the chapters faster? Is there a model that's more akin to what they do with manga in Japan, where it's 300 pages on cheap paper for very low cover price? And those are things where everybody constantly says, here's the answer to what's next, and they don't know. But it's a constant dialogue that every publisher is having, is what is the way to keep people engaged and wanting to read and wanting to spend money on what is a becoming kind of a luxury item.
Yeah, it's definitely that constant battle of floppies versus trade.
Yeah.
I think just from my network of contacts, people opt out of the floppies and just wait for the trade. And
But
so
then the
it's
trade has a higher retail, so it's a more extreme barrier for entry. Like, you
yep,
could sample a comic at $4 and see if it's any good, but would you
yeah,
sample a trade at $20? Maybe
or
not.
more.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, totally. How I mean, that's a great point. Um, how do you so again, talking about kind of the future landscape, the big controversial topic now is AI, or AI tools. How do you see that impacting comic books going forward?
I think the first publisher that publicly makes a book with AI in some broad or recognizable or identifiable way is done. Like, it's a hand drawn, handmade medium, and that's what people love about it. Is the people that are making the art, they can go meet and talk to at conventions, they get stuff signed. And I know, at least like generationally, we're all completely against it. Just the next generation that is listening to some AI music and not necessarily knowing or caring who made it going to care about AI made comics. I would like to think that they would, but they probably won't to the same degree. So I don't know. I think everybody just kind of has to figure out individually where their line is, but it is not a thing I see any value in. And I want comics that are written and drawn and colored and all that by people, and stories that are told by people and not, approximations or simulations of people. And so I don't know. It's really depressing when you see the amount of friends and peers and things that have lost their jobs because of AI, because I don't know, we're removing the need for people to want to get good at making art. And like, why isn't AI automating the shitty stuff that we don't want to be doing, instead of
Right.
like helping make it easier for people to create something that approximates art? And I don't know. I'm pretty down
Yeah.
on it. So
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like, out of the gate, you were hoping that AI would alleviate some of the traditional normal chores and workloads
yeah,
so that humans can spend time doing art.
yeah. I mean, the,
uh,
the thing of it is though, like making comics has never made sense to people that don't want to make art. Like the people that aren't driven to sit in their room and draw over and over again for years until they get good enough to be publishable, like being able to type in a couple prompts and make a thing, like fine, you can go do that and impress your friends that don't care about it. So I don't know that the people that care enough about practicing a thing to make music or make art are going to use it as a shortcut. There will be people that don't care about that, that can go off and do it on their own. But again, like that's, I guess, one thing about comics now is there's something for everybody. Like I feel like almost every audience can find material that suits their tastes, which didn't used to be the case decades ago. And so if there's a segment of tech people that want to go make AI comics and impress each other with the cool prompts they put in, like, okay, fine. But I wouldn't expect the majority of the comic buying or selling public
right.
to get involved with that.
Right. So, what other like from a creator's standpoint, again, talking about how AI could be disruptive, and what other big pain points do you see creators facing today or in the future?
I mean, shrinking audiences and the distribution thing that happened this past year with Diamond,
Right.
Diamond collapsing was such a detrimental thing for the business as a whole. Like every time there's anything that allows people to have easy reasons to stop buying, a lot of them don't come back. And so just finding ways to get these books in front of people in a big enough way is becoming more of a challenge. Now retailers have to deal with multiple distributors and try to remember where to order which book and for who, which is why I think crowdfunding has become so prevalent and so kind of necessary, because now if you make a book that people want to see, you can directly get it to them. You can get them cool extras to go along with it. You can sort of make the nicest version of a book. And if you get enough people that want to support that effort, that book's going to happen. You don't have to worry about a publisher or a retailer or a distributor sort of taking it on. You can just do it yourself. And so that, I mean, that's certainly not a pain point. I think that is the pain point is like, how does sort of the retail network that makes and sells books, how do they survive? But I think the individual creator being able to put books in front of their audience, that's a great thing. It's just, if you're a new creator starting out, you don't have that built-in audience. How do you build enough of an audience through a crowdfunding platform to actually get your book funded and made?
So, speaking of again creators, if you are an aspiring artist, writer, what is the best way to try to break into the industry? Like, what's the best way to get noticed today? What do you
That at least
think?
has kind of been the same answer for the last, I don't know, decade or two or forever, is make something yourself,
Mhm.
and get it out there and use that as your calling card, as your way to show a publisher, like, here's a thing I made. because not only does it allow you to show off your writing, your art, whatever your role might be, but it also shows that you care enough about a thing to get it done. There are endless amounts of started and never finished projects that people have undertaken. And a lot of times, finishing a thing is the hardest thing because you always want to go on to the next exciting idea and not finish the one
Right.
you're currently working on. And so I think it goes such a long way to have a finished thing, whether it's a short story in an anthology or it's a thing that you completely self-published that you can spread around. I think that's a great thing to be able to put in front of publishers, but also going out and doing your own thing. And I don't know, not initially needing them, like make them need you,
Right.
because a lot of times now you see publishers will, I don't know, just scout out various social media platforms and find talent that way. And so it's minimized the need to mail off or email samples to them because they're finding you through word of mouth, through your friends, helping spread things around, all of that. So getting your work visible to a mass audience, even if it's just through social media or different online portals and stuff, is, I think, the best first way to, just start building a following and then getting publishers to see what you're doing.
Great insight. So, given that again, you were in the unique position at IDW, you would have seen a lot of different pitches and scripts. What stands out as a green flag? Like if someone's submitting a pitch package, what are some of the key elements that you're looking for to potentially green light that?
I mean, the first thing, more than the story idea itself, is brevity. There were times when you'd get these pitches and it's like a 40-page document that is just the proposal for the prelude story that hasn't got to the main pitch itself, and you're just like, there's no time to read this. Like there used to be, like back in the Bronze Age or whatever, there used to be like submissions editors, and their whole job was just to do that. And now it's like, to look at submissions, that's the thing you do after all the other parts of your job are done, and those other parts are usually never done. So you have to kind of force yourself to find time. And so the key is to not put something that's so over detailed in front of somebody before you know that they're interested. So you hook them with something short, like high concept, or a single page write up that kind of breaks down the storyline, the beats of the story itself, maybe the art style, but just getting them to ask you what happens next, or getting them to ask you, like, well, tell me more. Like, that's what you want. You don't want to have them have a document that is so all complete and conclusive and detailed that they go, all right, well, I know everything I need to know now. I don't need to actually talk to you about this, but it's not right for me, so I just move on. So yeah, you give them a little bit to hook them, and then you kind of build on it from there. Story wise, like, it's going to vary publisher to publisher. Like, some people want YA or middle grade stories. Some people want stuff that's more adult. Pitching a Marvel and DC, but unless you have an established track record, usually never gets you any, may not even get your response. Like, they never want you trying to break in at that level. They want you broken in at all these different levels and sort of build your way up to the major leagues. But also,
So you're saying I can't just send them my Venom pitch? That sucks. That's unfortunate.
Oh, you can send it.
Yeah, into the void.
Yeah. And then also just knowing who you're pitching to. Like, if you have a pitch for, I don't know, a funny animal comic or something, and you're pitching it to Vertigo or places that don't do that kind of material, it becomes obvious you're just kind of blanketing the land with this pitch and not necessarily interested in that publisher. And every publisher wants to feel like you're talking to them because you really like what they do and think what you do fits alongside everything else that they've done. So just knowing who you're pitching what project to is also good. And also, if you don't do that, if you do just want to blanket everybody, at least make sure you change the company name. I got a number of pitches that were to Dear Dark Horse, Dear Image.
That's great.
So, and it happens, but it's always kind of amusing.
Always triple check your emails and yeah, that's hilarious.
Right. Don't give, I guess the key is to not give any editor an easy reason to not read on.
Right. You put the wrong company and the wrong name.
And I mean, some people are jerks and they'll use that, or, they'll say like, well, you didn't do this right, or you emailed me after 4 p.m., which is, I might cut off, stuff like that, where they just kind of, I don't know, they look for reasons to say no, and because there's just so much other work and so many other projects. And so the key is to not give them easy reasons to say no.
So again, you've managed so many projects and so much talent, and talent can sometimes be challenging to manage and corral. It's like, herding cats, as they say. What do you wish that creators or artist talent understood more about the business side of making comics?
Um, I wish everybody understood that sharing bad news is so much better than not responding. It's like that whole thing of like the wow, that's a terrible example. I was going to reference like a soldier lost in Vietnam. Like, you'd rather know what happened to the body than always wonder. Like, when you're asking for an update on something and you don't hear back because it's probably bad news and they don't want to share the bad news, it's like, no, I can adapt to bad news and we can adjust the schedules and we can figure out how to deal with it. But just going into
Ghosting.
like turtle mode or ghosting is a terrible way to approach things, because it just doesn't allow there to be any kind of fix. And then it sort of tags you as somebody, you get tagged as unreliable much more by not responding at all than by just saying, hey man, something happened in my life where I couldn't get this done in time. Here's what I'm going to do to, or here's when I think I can get it done. Like, that's fine. Things happen, deadlines get blown, like problems arise, and you sort of deal with them. And I think everybody can understand that much more than they can understand just like the silence or wondering. And it's totally a two-way street. Like, there's a million people that will tell you stories of reaching out to a publisher and never hearing back, or going, through a few stages of a pitch and then getting ghosted. And it's never good or right either way. But again, like when you're the creator and you're sort of reliant on that publisher to employ you, it's much more helpful to be responsive than non-responsive. So
I mean, I totally agree with that. My frustrations doing my little ventures, and across any, no matter, if you're in project management, the most annoying thing that can derail a project is zero communication and completely ghosting. Because to your point, you can't adapt. You don't know if this person is even going to come back into the picture. Like, what is happening? So I definitely echo that sentiment that communication is super important. Even if it's bad news, don't be shy to share what is going on.
And I mean, the flip side of that is publishers should also be much better about sharing bad news with creators, because again, it's the same thing where you send in a pitch and then you wait, you don't hear anything. You're like, well, is the body still alive or is it not? Like, if my book's not right for you, just tell me. It's fine. Like, I'd rather
Right.
know, because then I'm now frozen and don't want to pitch it to somebody else because you're still a maybe because you haven't responded at all. And so, yeah, I certainly don't put the lack of communication on just the creative side. Like, publishers are terrible about responding to. So everybody on
So,
all sides could get better at that.
so given that I feel that, like in any industry, networking is super important, and that's how a lot of doors are opened.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest networking mistakes you see creators and artists make while they're trying to navigate their way?
Pitching at a convention, unless you get specifically asked to pitch at a convention, it never goes well, because you'll be talking to the editor and they're doing this because they're looking for their next meeting, which is probably running late, which is going to impact the rest of their schedule. They haven't gone to the bathroom, they haven't eaten, and you're trying to hold their attention enough to like focus on what you're saying, and they're never going to. And so the thing I always tell people is go up, say hi, get them to know your name and your face, and then say, hey, I've got this thing. I think that'd be great for you. Maybe you mentioned like the character it involves, if it's like a major publisher or something. Do you mind if I drop your line in, I don't know, a week or 10 days and follow up on this, and just leave it at that? And if they say yes, get contact or business card or whatever from them. But I think the asking if you could pitch them after they've had time to settle back into work after the convention is usually so appreciated that it works much better than trying to pitch in person. And I get the inclination to want to do that, because what are the chances you're in front of a, Marvel or whoever editor face to face? And so you want to try to take full advantage while you're there. But again, that usually kind of works against you because there's so many different things that they're contending with that day that it's better to just be like, hey man, I'm gonna drop you a line a week. Is that cool? And they're usually going to say
Yes,
yes because you're not pestering it in that moment. So
that's great advice. That is the same sentiment in gaming. You hear a lot of leadership echo the same sentiment of back in the day at like E3 as an example. It's like, and they don't want to feel, they want to feel to establish an actual authentic relationship first. And to your point, let's follow up post event with business, right? Like, let's just
especially at E3, like E3, you can't hear anything, like it's nothing but like an onslaught of sounds. And so trying to have somebody pay attention to what you're saying was tough.
Yeah. Would you, so I guess speaking of E3 is now kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
How important would you say conventions are today for the comic book industry? Are they still like super essential, or are they kind of changing with the times?
I mean, I still think they're great. Like, I think they're great for people to go, go meet Scott Snyder and have him sign your absolute Batman and tell him how important the story was to you and all that. I think that's great for fans to be able to do that. I think it's great for creators to be able to meet fans and kind of get feedback that they maybe don't get if they're, I don't know, home or in their echo chamber where they don't get sort of broader impact that their book might or might not be having. It also allows like fans or aspiring creators to walk around and just see the breadth of material being offered to help you kind of figure out like, all right, well, this thing I want to do is maybe too similar to that. So maybe I should change, or I walk the floor and I don't see anybody that's doing this. So I'm going to go try to pitch this because I think all of that stuff, just being able to be a part of, I don't know, the enthusiasm and the creativity and everything that happens in the room at conventions is great. I mean, there's bits of it that I think have gotten harder, and just like it's hard for an individual creator who goes and gets a table and wants to sell their indie book because the fans have paid hundreds of dollars for a package or a meet and greet or to get an autograph from some celebrity. And I think that it's a bummer that the money is going to the people that probably least need it in some of these cases. And it'd be great if there was a way to equalize that a bit more, like maybe make the tables cheaper / free for indie creators or something. But I don't know. I still see the value in it in lots of different ways. That, and also just like I say, getting able to meet and introduce yourself to editors, not necessarily pitch them, but get a face to face, and then sort of get their tacit permission to drop them a line and talk more after the convention's over.
Yeah, I'm still a huge advocate of conventions, whether it's gaming or comic books, just because it's a great way to further build sentiment, further connect with fans, especially if you're a creator yourself. A way to have an ear to the ground and also hear what they're saying and interact with them. I think it's really, I think, an important part of building your brand. But I understand, to your point of like, as an indie creator, it's expensive to ship books there, rent a booth, hotel, etc. When if you were to reinvest, that few $1,000s into, digital marketing, you might have a greater ROI, right? So
or at least like maybe avoid the shows like New York or San Diego, the ones that are very costly. It's almost impossible to break through because there's so much else going on. So you pick a smaller regional show and go do that, and you've got time to like really spend and talk to people. You can talk to, I don't know, pick the brains of a bunch of different creators that are there, or really spend, real time talking through creative or talking to fans. I think that's probably more valuable than trying to be in the same room as 1,000 other people at some of these major shows.
Speaking of fans, what's something about the comic book industry that you wish fans understood more? I mean, I have a long list, but love to hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, I think a lot of it is just the stuff that I'm kind of glad they don't understand too. Is they'll be like, well, why don't you do this? I want to see this character do this, and you want to be like, well, see, we had to pitch the licensor 2 years prior, and we have a 3-year plan that was already approved, and so you're like, again, kind of the business end of things is what holds back some of the fun creative things you would like to try. And I never want to explain that because you can just sort of see the life drain from their eyes. And they're just like, yeah, but anyway, I like this thing to happen. So can you do it? And so I don't know. Like I love conventions for that reason, just to go hear from fans because they'll bring up things you never thought of, or you'll do a thing that you were sitting in your room working on for 6 months, and then you hear that it actually had an impact on somebody, and that is like the most gratifying part of all of this. And then I don't know, like just yeah, I just love hearing feedback, good and bad, from people directly, because I think just that direct communication is so much more valuable than I don't know, social media comments and stuff where you don't know the person or the reason why they're saying some of the stuff they're saying.
Or if it's a bot.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
So final question here. What projects are you most excited about right now that's going on in the industry? There's a lot of cool stuff. You can't be biased. You can't choose your own. So out of all of the different kind of creator projects going out right now, what's really caught your eye recently?
Oh God. I mean, I've been doing books as an editor at large with Abrams, and places like Abrams that are doing these adult graphic novels, I think, are doing such cool, smart sort of nonfiction books they're just the stuff I didn't grow up reading to the same degree as superhero books, and so I've certainly tried over the last 15 years to be very good about picking up more and more nonfiction books. God, is there anything specific that's been announced for next year though that I'm excited about that's not my own stuff? I don't know.
What
I mean,
about
yeah.
did you check it? Did you check out like any like the absolute Batman or Kirkham? I
Yeah,
forget, what is the name?
all the Energon universe stuff. It's like it's weird because I dealt with the Hasbro stuff for a decade, and so it's weird to see it handed off to somebody else. And then, like when I'm reading Daniel Warren Johnson's Transformers book, you're like, oh, this is the best possible version of what this book should be like. This is amazing, and so it's very cool to see it, in a direction that like what we were doing wasn't doing. So that's always fun, is just to see what other people are doing with these things that I sort of once, presided over in whatever ways. And yeah, the absolute stuff has been a thrill just to see it. Like that stuff, I think more than any other superhero book over the last decade is bringing in younger readers again, which it just like the superhero publishers have been very good at publishing to their core audience, and their core audience just kind of keeps aging and going along with them. But it's not been great at bringing in that next generation of reader, and it feels like these absolute books actually are doing that. Between those and like DC with their compact books, the price point is great. You 300 pages for $10. Like all of these kind of things are helping bring in, I think, a very necessary and needed younger readership again.
Yeah, I'm really happy with DC right now. I think both
Yeah.
from the comic book side and content. Again, Marvel's great, but I just think that there's personally been a little bit of some misses recently, and I think um, I'm really excited with what James Gunn is doing. And I think Peacemaker's great. I'm really excited about Supergirl and his future DC universe. And I think, like you said, the absolute universe I think is really cool. I'm really personally enjoying it. So I'm happy to see, I'm happy to see that, because that's great. Because if they're doing well, that just, again, that lifts everybody up. So that's positive to see.
And I mean, and James Gunn is very good about when he's working on these projects to call out the creators and different comic storylines that he read that influenced, Peacemaker or Superman or what have you. And it's
He
great
is
to
great
see,
like that.
yeah, and I wish there was more of that. Like speaking of conventions, it'd be great to see, the writer and artist on a Thor comic sitting next to the Thor actor when there's a Thor movie, instead of being totally separate parts of a convention hall.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Like I'm a big fan of Ryan Stegman, and I thought like his run on Venom was great, like fantastic. It was like my favorite Venom run, and his creation of Null, which then has
Mm,
been in video games, and it was a
yeah.
very small cameo in the movies. and there's no, there's nothing. It feels like DC treats their talent a lot better, is I guess how I would frame it. That's my 2 cents on that. But listen, Chris, thank you so much. I've kept you for an hour. Thank you so much. You've provided so much insight. It was great picking your brain and going over your history and your experience. And I think there's so much gold nuggets here that creators trying to get into the industry or just kind of get a better sense of the inner workings are going to learn. I think this was a fantastic TED Talks from Chris Ryall. This was great. I can't wait for everybody to hear this, because I think you had some amazing insight. So again, thank you so much for giving me your time.
Thank you so much. Conversation. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay. Until next time.